Okay, we're now recording the webinar, so that's good. So, okay, and I don't think there's anything else to comment on. So, we will make the recording available. So, just a few introductions then. So, yes, we're going to talk to you today about creating heavyweight content marketing campaigns. Really pleased to be doing this with our colleagues from Freshegg, and David's got huge experience in this area. So, really pleased that David's going to share that with us today. Couple of words about me. I'm just one of the BuzzSumo directors. I'll show you a little bit more about the tool for those of you who don't know it a little bit later in the webinar. But primarily my focus is really on just seeing how data can help us create better content, so trying to understand what content resonates, how it gets amplified, who amplifies it. So what can we learn from data is my focus. So you'll find me most days crunching lots of data and lots of numbers to try and understand things. This is where I tend to come from. But without further ado, that's more than enough on me. I'll just pass you over to David to take you through the first half of the webinar. Over to you, David.
Great, thanks very much, Steve. Thanks all for joining this morning. It's great to have you on board listening in, and if you're going to listen to this afterwards, thanks also for your time. So very brief introductions before we kick off. My name's David Somerville. I'm currently Head of Inbound Marketing at Freshegg, and I run a department of content, social media and campaign specialists here at Freshegg, helping our clients get the most out of their websites and their online properties. And I've been running campaigns both online and offline since pre-Google days. For those of you that are post-Google days, you're a lot younger than me, but there were such a thing as campaigns, and there was such a thing as campaigns before Google and before that search engine took over. Very quickly, Freshegg, if you're not aware, is an integrated digital marketing agency. We've been around about 15 years. We're based here in Worthing, where I am at the moment, on the south coast of England. We have an office in London. We also have an office in Sydney in Australia and service clients over there with a team as well. And we do a large number of services, but my area focus is around running digital marketing campaigns for clients. And just a few people we work with across the board, some kind of nice names there. Lots of clients, various industries as well. We're not industry focused or specific. So today's webinar, what we're going to talk to you about, and hopefully give you some knowledge and advice and practical stuff you can take away. We're going to kick off looking at different types of campaign planning that are involved. Then followed by that, looking at what are the key campaign planning elements to consider. So when you're sitting down to plan any campaign of any size, what are the real key important things that you should remember to do every single time? Next up, I'm going to look at different phases. So how do you actually run through a process as such of campaign planning, and following that process through will help you have really good campaigns. And then finally, we're going to look at campaign planning tools. There's a few tools that I've included here, which I hope you'd find useful. It's tools that we use here every day at Freshegg, and Steve's going to talk to you at this part around BuzzSumo as well, which is one of the tools that we do use a great deal of. And just a little note at the start is the fact that the webinars talked around creating heavyweight content marketing campaigns, but actually a lot of the processes and the advice in this webinar are relevant to all types of digital marketing campaigns. Whether you're running content marketing specific campaigns, or maybe a social media campaign, or something else entirely. So yeah, this should be of interest to everyone who is involved in running digital marketing campaigns in some form. So just to start then, different types of campaign planning. There's two main types in my mind as such, and the first one is illustrated by this image here, which is takes me back to a couple of months ago. I was heading up to a client meeting in London on a very busy commuter train, as they tend to be, heading from the south coast into London every day. And I was notified by my colleague by email that the client was expecting to see in that meeting a campaign presentation, and she realized the fact that we hadn't actually discussed this campaign presentation before, and therefore could I put something together. Obviously, with only about an hour and a half to go, I realized I didn't have much time, and I was on my own, so I didn't have the usual team of people I do here at Freshegg around me, so I had to plan on my own. So literally grabbed my laptop, used a tool called Lucidcharts, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and was able to put together a mind map showing how my campaign would look like. turned up at the meeting an hour or so later with the client, was able to show this mind map to the client, pitched in the campaign idea, and they got it, and they were excited by it and signed it off. So solo campaign planning is something that is possible. It is really quick and easy to do, and as my example shows, you can do it anywhere, even on the packed commuter train from Worthing up to Victoria. What's good with your solo training, if you possibly can, is to get away from your desk. So this does apply actually if you're training in a group, or you're brainstorming in a group of people, but sort of taking yourself away from that normal environment is often a really good idea, just to kind of get your creative ideas flowing. The one thing about solo campaign planning, however, is that it can lack some of the benefits you get with a team planning session. And actually, I find that planning as a team or a group, even that's a very small group, can often be very effective. So planning as a team, it's a way of bringing lots of people together to generate those campaign ideas and really kind of sense check everything to have a solid campaign plan in place. So I feel that team planning is really, really good for getting lots of ideas from lots of different perspectives. So what we tend to do is get people in the room who we know think differently in their heads. Their brains are wired slightly different. We've got some guys here who are very creative. We will often even include a designer in the room, a creative designer, who will usually be sketching stuff away in their notebook while we're having an idea section. We'll often pick on, there's a couple of guys who are more technical, maybe from the technical SEO team, who will look at things from a really kind of logical kind of technical point of view. And we've got people who are analytical, so we may even get one of the insight data team involved, so they can look at it from their kind of data angle as well. So it's just really nice to get people who've got different skills and different ways of thinking in order to get a lot of different ideas. It's also useful to use people who've got specialist subject knowledge or interests. So if you're running a campaign on cats, for example, if you know you've got lots of cat lovers in your company, then definitely get those people involved. They'll often have a really good insight into that industry and know the audience possibly a lot better than you can glean even from data often. And another way to link through to that is using outside experts. So if you know of anybody that you could invite into an initial team planning session because they're specialists in that area for whatever reason, then that would be useful as well. We have done on occasion team planning sessions with our clients because it means that we can get them involved. They know their industry and marketplace really nicely. But you can do the same if you're in-house and you know experts in the field. Potentially you could get those guys involved in your planning as well. And then a final note around this is again, go outside. Go to the pub. Some people do that, I know. Find the space where you think it's going to be good to get that creative kind of atmosphere happening. We have different offices here at Fresh Egg which are a bit more creative and allow that creativity. So it's really good to kind of take yourself away from that just desk environment or from that very kind of solitary potential meeting room environment and actually kind of go somewhere else and get creative in that way. So those are the two real main types of campaign planning that we see are really effective. And then next up, it's looking at what are those really important key elements that you need to consider. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this can be whether your campaign is very small with a small little budget, or whether it's a huge big campaign that's going to run for 12 months and is running across all your marketing channels. All of these elements apply across the board to that. And the first one of those is, this is something we strongly believe in that's really important, is all around audience. And it's simply looking to really clearly lay out who are the audiences that you're trying to reach with this campaign. And it's really important to understand who those audiences are. Often people will have a preconception about the audience group. You may have some demographic data or persona data, but it's often a good idea to take that one step further. And something we do is something called audience intent, and it's actually a large research piece that we carry out. But there's some kind of nice quick wins from that I think are really relevant to campaign planning in terms of finding out about your audience. So one of these, for example, is search intent. So this is a really simple process of looking around the web and seeing what is it that those audience groups are actually searching for, and therefore can your campaign give the answers or the solutions to what they're searching for. So within your space or in a particular topic area, are there any questions that they're asking on a regular basis online? Are they asking lots of things in forums or on social media? And then you could create a campaign to answer those. Another area to look at that's important is framing of content. So this is trying to get an insight into your audience on a more of a psychographic level and working out what sorts of things make these people tick, what sort of audience group are they, and how potentially then should we frame our content around our campaign in order to appeal to them. So what messages are going to appeal to them? Are these people more likely to be risk takers, or are these people more likely to be sort of the people who play a bit more safe? And by knowing these sorts of things about your audience, you can really get a good idea of what this campaign should potentially look like. And then a final thing which is really useful is simply looking at which digital marketplaces or which digital spaces on the web are these people hanging out. So are these audiences heavily involved in Twitter? If so, you know your campaign can be promoted nicely on Twitter. Are they big forum advocates, or do they use a certain group of other websites or other networks in order to communicate online? So by identifying where these people hang out, you can really target them well. So as well as audience, it's really key to consider your objectives. And this is simply asking the question, what are you looking to achieve with this campaign? So often it's sales, so we need to drive sales or revenue potentially for a certain product or a certain service area. It could be traffic back to your website. Maybe it's brand awareness. You want to build your brand up, get your name out there a bit more, or build the awareness of a particular product more. It could be something like authority. So again, it's brand related, but do you want to position your brand as being more authoritative and expert in a certain area? And then there could be some other sort of more tangible things such as email sign up. So we've done this before for clients where they've asked us to create a campaign that will drive them additional email sign-ups from the right sort of people who are interested in hearing from them via that channel. And also user-generated content. Again, we've done campaigns to get the users to generate content as part of that campaign process, and then we can use that content in various different forms as kind of as a phase 2 as well. And one thing that we kind of talk a lot about here at Fresh Egg, it's really important that everyone who's involved in the planning process is really clear on the objective or the objectives of the campaign. And this needs to happen right before you start that initial brainstorming. If you're not clear on the objectives, that's when things and ideas may crop up that are just completely the wrong sort of idea. They're going in the wrong direction, or they're an amazing idea, but when you look at what's it actually going to do, is it going to hit our objectives, it's just not that right idea for that right objective. And objectives are really key to measuring the success of the campaign. So with campaign planning, which we'll talk about in a minute, as well as deciding what you're going to do, it's really important to decide how you're going to measure that based on what you've said you're looking to achieve. Next up, more practical one is timelines. So this is considering for your campaign, what are the known timelines that you know at this stage when you start your planning? So do you know, for example, if it's a campaign to assist with a product launch, do you know the date of that product launch? Is that fixed in stone? Do you know if there's any other marketing activity that's happening online or offline that you need to coincide with, and when's that happening? And by knowing all of these timelines, it means that you can have a sense check also on the scale of your campaign potentially. So for example, if the campaign is due to launch in a week's time, because you get a week's notice to turn something around, you're obviously not going to be able to do certain things that will take you longer to do. You may not be able to do lots of teaser activity work around the campaign. It may be literally a very quick, simple campaign that needs to get done in a week's time. So knowing what you need to do and when is very, very important. However, if you have lots of ideas generated and they're not going to fit with this campaign because of the timelines, then make sure you store them somewhere, write them down, stick them onto an Excel spreadsheet, however you want to record them, because often with campaigns we find that we work on an initial campaign and then we decide that actually it needs another boost somewhere down the line, and then we pull out all of the other ideas that we had that may take longer or may be more complicated, and we can start to work on those to extend the life of that campaign and extend the effect it has. And another more practical one, but again really important, is around budgets. So knowing what the ballpark area, even for budgets, are for the campaign is really, really, really good and really useful to know. If you can plan a campaign with your budget in mind, it's likely to be a lot more effective. And this even it relates back to simple generation of ideas. If people are in a room and they're allowed to generate ideas without any budget restrictions at all, often all of the ideas that come up will be those big ones that are just going to simply not be able to fit in with what you can afford or the budget that you're given to do. So it's good if you can, even if it's a broad or a range of a budget, it's really useful to know that. And also consider whether you think you're going to need additional costs or to build into that budget costs for things like content creation. If you're going to want video in your campaign, have you got the budget for the video? What about paid promotion? Are you going to be running Facebook ads or Twitter ads, or maybe a PPC campaign to back up your content campaign? So just getting an idea of all of those up front, even as rough costs, again, is really, really useful thing to do. And then next up we have mechanics. So by mechanics, what I mean is what are the elements of the campaign? What's it actually going to be made up of when you're actually running that campaign? So what's the campaign going to look like? Is it going to be maybe a survey that you're going to do, and then that survey will be turned into a press release and sent out to the media? Are you going to create a large content hub, which is going to need lots of different content writing and producing, and then a promotional plan for that? Maybe it's a competition. So we did a campaign for a client that was around winning free glasses for life, which is a really successful competition. So with that, we knew from the start it was going to be a competition. That was the mechanic. And then we were able to build a campaign around it. Perhaps it's video, or we've done some video campaigns recently for a travel client, which again, knowing up front it's video and what's involved, we're able to plan accordingly and effectively. And also thinking of what else might you need access to? So is it going to be running something on their social media accounts? What accounts do they have that you can gain access to? How big are those community sizes, etc.? And then next up is a really important phase, and often it's overlooked, especially when you're campaign planning. We've possibly been guilty of it ourselves sometimes, I think, is thinking we've got this great idea and everyone gets excited about it, but how are you actually going to promote that? How are you going to get that idea out to people? You can't just stick it on a website necessarily and expect everyone to come and find it, because that's not always the case. There's so much content out there in the web these days that needs attention. You really need to work out how you're going to drive people to it. So we use lots of different inbound marketing techniques and channels. So we'll look at things like social media channels. We can use multimedia channels. So has it got video element that we can put onto YouTube or Vimeo? Is there any images we can use? Can we use Snapchat in some way in this? Are there documents produced or presentations? So which of those inbound channels can we use to really help drive that kind of promotion activity around it? So looking at, yes, what access do you have to things like email even? I'm sure many of you who send out regular e-newsletters, and if you compare those stats to other forms of marketing channels, you'll probably find, like we do, that email is still very, very effective at driving traffic and conversions. It's a really good channel. If you've got a healthy database with people who are engaged and want to be receiving your emails on a regular basis, that's a really, really good way of using that for promotion of campaigns. Then biddable media as well. Again, I talked about budgets, but is there a budget available to run PPC campaigns perhaps, or paid social advertising? And then finally around sort of the digital PR outreach angle as well. When you're planning your campaign, do you think there's a story or some form of news angle you can take from it that may be good to try and actually get out there via sort of some more traditional media routes and other online PR routes as well? And then finally in this section, a key planning element, and it's probably one of the most important ones, especially if you need to be reporting back to a boss or a client as to how the campaign's gone, is all around measurement. So this is asking yourself, how are you going to measure the efforts and the effects that your campaign has. And the way we find that a really simple way to tackle this is to put a measurement plan in place. So a measurement plan is simply a plan that shows you what are the top level objectives for your campaign. So we talked about these before around, is it driving traffic? Is it driving social community growth? Is it driving brand engagement and awareness? So what are those key objectives? And then next down in the plan, you'll look at KPIs. So what are the performance indicators that you're going to look at that you know that helps you gauge whether that campaign has been a success or not. And then below that, the next level down is metrics. So these are the actual things that you're going to measure, whether you're using something like Google Analytics or another form of online sort of statistical measurement, or whether it's measuring on social media channels. You need to decide what those metrics are for that campaign. So obviously, if the campaign is something around email signups, you're going to be measuring email signup, but you also may want to dive down further to see what type of people have signed up or where they've come from, and any other indicators as well. So then putting a measurement plan in place is a really good idea and a really easy way of showing the potential ROI and the return you can get on your campaign after it's been running. An example of measurement plan here is one that we've created. It's an example for a small e-tailer, but as you can see across the top, you've got your objectives in place. So these are the big blue boxes. So you've got sales and growth and brand building, customer loyalty, and grow and engage social community. So these are just examples of what the objectives would have been for this campaign. The KPIs underneath those are then growing revenue, growing customer base, or potentially increasing your reach and visibility for brand building, or growing your likes and follows for engaging on social media channels. And then below that, you would then fill in your plan your individual metrics. So if it's growing likes and follows, it could be, okay, we want to see on Twitter and on Facebook and Pinterest. If it's increasing reach and visibility, your metrics might be how far the message spread that I tweeted out, or what were the number of views we got to that message on our website from new visitors. So by putting together a measurement plan when you're campaign planning, you've got that plan in place, everyone's aware of it. You can use that at any stage you need to report back on. You just simply refer back to your measurement plan. So next up, we're going to look at the different phases of campaign planning. So you've got all your key elements together, and those key elements, as I say, are the ones that you really look to use every time you do campaign planning. They're really important to consider. And the different phases is a process-based thing, really, and it's very, very simple. And there are a number of phases within the process that we find. Some people work in a slightly different way, but this is a process that we use, and we find it to work very nicely indeed, and very simply. So the first part of that process is simply that initial brainstorm. That's getting your team together, or maybe it could be just you on your own, and literally it's that initial point where you are generating a large volume of ideas related to the topic or related to the campaign area that you need to get those ideas for. One important point is to make sure everyone's got a brief for that brainstorm session, even if it's a very simple brief, and also give them any relevant background information as well. So tell them who the audience are in advance, tell them the objectives, and make sure they're aware of budgets and timelines potentially as well. And that way, when people come into that brainstorming session, they're armed and they're able to help produce ideas that are going to give value, because they're a bit more on track than just a big scattergun approach. We also find it's really important to not be critical if you can. It is human nature, unfortunately, to hear someone's idea and then look for the faults in it. But we try here to encourage a bit of a culture of literally letting people splurge their ideas out and not trying at this stage to be too critical, because that comes at the next stage. And a final thing that we use in this area is actually using specific brainstorming techniques. So we've had training sessions here on how to use different techniques in brainstorming, and this really, really helps when you've hit that period where after maybe 20 minutes everyone's got their initial ideas out, and are starting to get a bit stuck and not sure where to go next, and you realize that whilst you've got lots of ideas, you could always do with some more. So brainstorming techniques allow you to really generate lots and lots of extra ideas. So one technique, for example, is injection, where into the conversation or into the discussion, an object or a word or something relevant is injected as such, and by that thing being injected, that sparks different thought processes and allows people to come up with a whole host of other ideas. Another technique, for example, and all of these are kind of online and worth looking up and studying in your own time, but another one is reversal, where you're literally flipping the problem on its head. So you're working backwards, saying, okay, this is where we want to get to, so let's work backwards to see what the idea could be in the first place in order to get us to this point. So you're just literally reversing the idea around. So once you've done your initial brainstorm, you've got hopefully a whole wall of ideas, or a whole flip chart full of ideas. It's the next stage, which is refinement. And what we do at this stage is reduce the number of people involved in that process. Occasionally, we'll roll the refinement and the brainstorming into one session, but generally we will have a separate session as a follow-up. Often that's maybe 2 or 3 people. It works much better when there's a smaller group. And at this stage, what you're doing is looking at your whole host of ideas, and you're sense checking them back to your key campaign elements. So you're looking at them saying, okay, we love that idea, but it's not quite going to hit our objectives, or that idea is great, but it's completely the wrong audience for this campaign. So by refining your ideas and going through them one by one, you're able to then pick out maybe an initial group of a short list that you're going to potentially to pitch to a client or pitch in-house, or you may even straight away see one that you know is a clear winner, and that's the idea that you want to really build out upon. So take a small group of you, go through all of the ideas, refer them back to those key campaign elements, and refine those ideas to pick a winner or a couple of winners. And again, we talked earlier about saving ideas for follow-up campaigns. This is a really good point to do that. So when you're going through and refining your ideas, we often sort them into categories or groups, and then we'll store those, we'll archive those away. Sometimes we might go to a client and suggest an idea, and it's completely the wrong idea for them, but we know we've got a list of other things that we can then go back to them with at a later date. And next up, after you've kind of pitched your ideas in, or you've chosen the winner yourself, it's then really important to build up what we call a campaign proposition. So by this we mean it's asking the simple question about what is it about this campaign that your audience will really engage with. So what's the key proposition of what's this campaign looking to achieve, and how is that going to really sort of engage your audience and get them to do what it is you want them to do, whether that's to buy something, whether it's to follow you on Twitter, whether it's to sign up for an email, etc. So again, refer back to your key elements such as audience and objectives. So if you're looking at your audience, you're matching them to that campaign, and you're saying what's the key, or what are the key things that are really going to get this group of audience engaged with. And having a campaign proposition allows you to look at the messaging for that campaign, looking at things such as calls to action, maybe social messaging as well, and just allows you to be thinking in the next stage of how are we going to position this campaign, how's the messaging going to be done, how's the content going to be done, etc. So this is a really useful guide for all of your activity from this point onwards in campaign planning. And once you've defined your proposition, based on your winning idea, the next stage is a practical one. So it's simply building out that campaign plan. And it's a simple series of questions really for us. It's looking at what tasks and activities now are required across this campaign, and that could be something very small such as writing social messages, or it could be something larger such as we need to film this video, so we then have to break down how that video is going to be produced and filmed, what are the various stages, and break that completely down into a list of tasks or activities. Next, we then assign who's going to be doing these. So is it something we're doing here? Is it something we've got to outsource to a video company, for example, or someone like that? Is it something that the client themselves are going to do? Is it something for our insight team to do? So for example, in campaigns, if we're setting up campaign tagging, or we want to set up a specific reporting dashboard, that's when we might engage with our insight team to get them to do that. So by knowing what tasks are required and who needs to do them, you're really starting to build out that campaign plan. And then you need to look at when these things need to be done. So working back from when your campaign's going to launch, you can then plot in very simply when this sort of stuff's going to be done. And then a final question is around how are you going to report on those results, and also related to that, when are you going to report on those results as well? So looking at your measurement plan, do you need to do anything at various stages in order to allow you to report on those? So do you need to baseline now your social media followers so that you can then look back and see whether that increased, for example? And there's loads of different ways you can campaign plan. Some people use sort of big project management software. Some people use online platforms such as Basecamp and Trello. We're Trello users here at Fresh Egg. We use it a lot and find it a really good tool. But also, and I'll often revert back to the good old Excel and just create a simple Gantt chart like the one here. So it's really simple. You're timelining across the top the weeks and the dates, and then down the side you've got your different kind of tasks and which sort of main area they fall into and who's going to do those, and then by just literally plotting them across you can very quickly and visually see who's going to do that sort of stuff and when they've got to do it. So that's your campaign planning process in a nutshell. But in order to make your campaign planning more easy and better and more effective, there's a number of tools that you can use in order to do that. And we actually find that that there are thousands and thousands of tools out there. We're discovering new ones every day. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great, and people are often sharing tools to help make campaign planning and campaign execution much easier. So what I've done is just collected a few examples here, and obviously including BuzzSumo, in order to show you which ones we find useful and which ones we use on a regular basis. So the first of these, and I alluded to it earlier, is something called Lucidcharts, and this is it's an online tool that allows you to draw and create visual representations, basically. So one of the key ones I use is mind maps. So for me, my brain thinks very visually, and when we're brainstorming ideas, we've got a meeting room here with a big glass wall where you can scribble ideas on, and I'll always take to that wall to draw things out and to mind map out how things are going to look, because that's how my brain works, and I find it much easier to interpret looking visually at certain things. So Lucidcharts allows you to do that on your computer, so you can draw out great mind maps to show, okay, how's the campaign going to work, what are the ideas, you can draw out the objectives, you can look at the different promotional channels and really kind of map out and sketch out how that's going to look. It also allows you to do things like create wireframes. So if as part of your campaign or marketing activity you've got to create a wireframe to give to a designer or a development team, you can create nice drag and drop wireframes that are really easy to use as well. And there's lots of other visual diagrams and tools and things you can use within it as well. So it's a nice little tool. It does have an offline option as well. So the train I was on going up to London, the mobile signal is a bit sketchy. I can't always tie it into my phone, so I use the offline version. Then when I get back to some connectivity, I then sync the two and then add the offline version back into my online version. So that's Lucidcharts, really worth checking out. Next up is Google Analytics, which is something that most people will be familiar with. Most of you have probably got Google Analytics on your website or work with Google Analytics on a regular basis. And I love GA because it really does allow you to take your existing data and give you that insight and intelligence into planning campaigns. So a couple of simple things you can use it to do a look at. What's the popular content on your website, and what are the traffic sources for this content as well? So do these match the campaign objectives? And if so, you can use that data and use your existing content to give you ideas of what other content you could be producing as part of your campaign. So a very simple report to run would be looking at what are your top landing pages. The example we've got here is a snapshot from recently from the Fresh Egg website, and what we found was that a post around Instagram tools, so top 6 Instagram tools, was our second biggest landing page on the whole website and was by far outperforming lots of other pages. And we found by looking at the source for that traffic, it was coming through Google search. So obviously our page had some great visibility in Google, so we were able to then decide as a mini campaign to refresh that post, re-promote it again, and again we get a whole host of traffic back into the site. So it's really easy just to select what your top landing pages are. and build those out. And another feature I like in analytics and Google Analytics is the site search. So if you have a search box on your website or on your client's websites, and if this is hooked up to GA, which it needs to be first, then you can use it almost on a real-time basis to see what people are searching for on your website. So again, here we could see as an example with Fresh Egg, people were searching for content hubs. That was their big search term that they were coming to our website using the search box to find. So again, we could say, okay, well, let's create some more content around content hubs, or Google Tag Manager as well was the second most popular one. So it's just a really good idea to use that data to build out into your campaigns. And another tool we like, and the reason we like it is because it was built by one of our Fresh Eggers. This was built by Dr. David Sewell, who's our head of innovation here. It's a very simple tool called Search Intent, and you'll find that at searchintent.co.uk. And what it does, it just simply allows you to type in a keyword, and it shows you then all of the related popular keywords that people are searching for on the web. So the example here, it's a bit hard to see from the diagram, but I searched for cat food, and I can see straight away that there are some brand searches in there. So people are also searching for Felix cat food or Whiskers cat food, or they're actually searching for cat food brands, cat food reviews, and free cat food. So actually we could say, okay, well, if I'm trying to target cat owners with a campaign around cat food, if people are searching for free cat food, then why not create a campaign that gives away free cat food or gives away free cat food vouchers? So this is a really simple tool, and you can use it to dive in. It works with Google, it pulls out Google, and you can select different countries as well. So if in the UK, you can just look at UK terms. If you're in Australia, you can do the same for Australia, and just look at all of the different connections for Google and often for Bing as well to see what people are searching for. And then that leads us on to BuzzSumo, where Steve's going to take over for a second.
Great. Thanks very much. That's brilliant. I just changed over screens. That last tool there reminds me of Hashtagify as well, which I use to find relevant
Yes.
trending hashtags as well, which is it's great. So
Yep,
I can definitely recommend Hashtagify as a tool if you want to find a trending hashtag, and then shows you all the related trending hashtags, which is great. So hopefully you can see my main screen there now. David, can you see my screen okay? Just checking. Okay,
no, it's still on mine at the moment.
Okay, can everybody else see my screen? Okay, it says I'm on there showing screen, so okay. Can everybody see my screen okay? Just shout in the chat box if the answer is no. Or yes, we've switched presenters back. Okay. Yep, lots of yeses. Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. That's good. That was good to confirm. Right, I'm just going to show you, David's obviously shown some great tools there. Just going to quickly show you a few bits about BuzzSumo and how you could use that as part of one of your campaign tools. I think the first thing to do is, if you go to the Content Research tab at the top of BuzzSumo here, you get a number of options, and the one people often start with is most shared. So literally, if you're researching a topic, let's say it's e-learning, one way of getting ideas is simply to see the most shared content in a particular time period. So we're now looking at the most shared content in the last month, and I've sorted by English, as there was a lot of non-English content. And I can see there was a TED talk recently in July, which has got huge numbers of shares, so that might be interesting. I can even filter down to the past week to see, what other topics are resonating at the moment and whether there's anything that might be interesting for me. And you can literally do it for any topic. So that was e-learning, but I'll sort of do pricing strategy, for example. We could see what was the most shared content about pricing strategy in the last month. And so you can just see what content's resonating, and it generates content ideas in terms of what might be working in your particular area. And if you're after infographics and things, you can filter by content type to see what types of content types are working. So one of the things you can do is just do that, just see what content is actually resonating for ideas. You can also see how competitors are doing in terms of their content. You can do a content analysis report for an individual site, or you can compare two domains. And I ran a domain comparison for you a little bit earlier this morning. I just took moz.com and inc.com as two examples. And so we're just showing for the last year how many pieces of content they published. Inc has obviously published a lot as a big publisher, and the average shares they got per post. So 262, 913, but then you can start to break it down. So where are they getting traction for their content? So we can see for Moz, it's mainly Twitter. For Inc, actually, it's mainly Facebook. We can also see what content types are getting traction for those two competitors or two organizations. So we can see for Moz, it's overwhelmingly list posts is where they get their most shares. A list post is anything that begins with a number. We can see it's also the top most shared post for Inc as well, but they're doing better actually with infographics and things as well. So you can see, and it's sometimes interesting to see where your competitors are getting traction. You can also see by day of the week where they're getting their most shares, and the graph here on the right is a more typical profile. We tend to find that people don't get so many shares later in the week. Moz is unusual because they run something called Whiteboard Friday, which tends to kick up the shares here on a Friday. You can also go down and see how they're doing in terms of content length. And what we see here is quite a typical pattern, actually, which is basically long form content gets more shares. If you've got an engaged audience, it always gets more shares. And so we see this quite consistently. But so you can look across competitors. The other thing you can do is look at influencers for a particular topic. So we could go back to our e-learning topic and we could search for influencers. And one thing that's particularly interesting, I think, when you search for influencers is their retweet rate. We did a lot of analysis and found that retweet rates were quite important in terms of amplifying content. So we've done a sort here by relevancy, but you can resort this any way you want. But it's sorted by default by average retweets down this right-hand side. So you can pull out the people who have a high retweet ratio, who may be people that are good to amplify your content. And often they're not always the people with lots and lots of followers. Sometimes they can have a high retweet ratio, but have lots of, but relatively few followers. And so you can search for influencers who might amplify your content. Another way of quickly doing that is, I find works quite well, is if you find the most shared content for an article. Another way is to view the sharers. So if I click here, view sharers for this article, we'll see who the Twitter sharers are for this article. And again, we've sorted it for you by average retweets. So we can see the top few people here who probably really amplified this content. And you'll find very quickly you get down to people with a retweet rate of 2 and below. Typically, we define an influencer as somebody with a retweet rate of 2 or above. Seems low, but actually very few people have that. Another thing that you can then do as well, if you're looking at content ideas here, is you can look at trending content. What we'll do on BuzzSumo is show you the most shared content today. So we're now looking at the most shared content and trending content. You can flip between trending and most shared. Trending is literally just the velocity of shares that it's getting at this current time, as opposed to the total shares. So you can look by trending or most shared. And so this is showing you across the whole of the internet the trending content, but you can create your own topic. So I created a topic here for content marketing. And so I can see today's trending content on content marketing. The trending scores are low because it's small relative to the whole of the internet, but we can see the content that's been published today on content marketing. So if I want to keep abreast of a particular topic, I can see what's been published today on a particular topic. So I've got one here on startups. You can literally create any topic you want, and you can see the trending content today, which will give you ideas for your campaign. So they're just a few ways in which you might want to use BuzzSumo to help with your campaign planning side of things. And I'll now just switch the screen back to David. I'll just give you back control, David, for your slides, if that's okay. And then you can just summarize things where we are. So I just pass back to David. Okay, so just pass back to David.
Okay.
And whilst David just shares his screen with you, if there are any other questions, do let me know. And any questions about BuzzSumo, I'm happy to answer. But we'll pick up questions at the end of this session as David now summarizes.
Great. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. Steve, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see your screen fine.
Great. Okay, so just to wrap up really, a key learning for me and a key takeaway, I guess, is that actually whether you're going to be on your own or whether you're part of a team, by putting the effort into this planning stage, then your campaign is likely to be much more effective. So I remember going on management training courses years ago where they taught you it's all about planning and preparation. And if you get that bit right, then when you come to executing it and then seeing how your campaign's done, it's just going to be much more effective by putting that effort in at the beginning. Don't forget those key campaign planning elements. So we always start here, and we're an audience-centered organization. We'll look at our audience first, and we're led by what the audience are and what we're looking to achieve with that audience. But consider your objectives, your budgets, your timelines, how you're going to promote your campaign, and then of course how you're going to measure it. Work through your campaign planning phase. So you start with that initial brainstorm, refine those ideas and pick your winners out. When you've got your winner, then you define what your campaign proposition is, and then finally it's putting the physical practical plan together. So who's going to do what and when. And then finally, using the right tools is going to make your life much easier. It's going to be much quicker and easier to produce amazing campaigns. And that's our presentation for today.
Great, thank you very much, David. You covered a lot of ground there, so I'm conscious there's a lot for people to take in, but it's a huge amount of ground. Thank you so much for covering all of that. So I'll just pick up some of the questions. We had a few questions come through. One of them was you talk about brainstorming with your teams, but staff and agencies are really busy. How do you get their time?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And we, as an agency, we have a number of clients, so there's always requirements for meetings, and people often talk about meetings for the sake of meetings. But what we do is try to get as much notice as possible and book it in early. So if people know it's booked in, it's in their calendar, then often that's the case. Sometimes we'll do an early session, so as soon as people get in, they come straight into a brainstorming session. Often they're not the most awake, but with a round of coffee, that often sorts out that problem. But it's we also try and make them a bit shorter, I guess. So rather than having a big 2-hour session, often we'll have maybe a quick half-hour or an hour session just to get that initial splurge of ideas. As I said before, after a certain amount of time, often you'll find that the ideas will start to dry up naturally anyway. So short and sweet sessions are a good way to kind of get that time in people's diaries, I guess.
Yeah. Dylan's come up with another good one as well. Offer donuts. So, so I think often offering
definitely. Donuts and cake.
Yeah, offering things to encourage people along is good.
Definitely.
So another question here from Valerie. You talk a lot about the planning stages of creating ideas, but not so much about the distribution stages, although conscious you were talking about lots of things to fit in there. Can you detail more about the channels you use to distribute content apart from the obvious?
Yeah, sure. So broadly, the key channels are generally that we would work with are your social media, but with that, it's looking at different types of social media networks as well. You may find, and there are literally thousands of networks out there. You may find that if you're working, for example, in fly fishing, that there's actually a social network for fly fishing that would be more effective to use, even if its community is smaller than, say, for example, using Twitter. You might find that there are specific networks in social media that are great. As I said before, email is really good for content. We've by using Google Analytics, we've seen before where we've promoted some content using social media, using other channels, paid channels, and you send an e-newsletter out to the database, and suddenly you get a big spike of traffic because people get that email. They wanted to get that email to engage with it, and they do respond to that. We use paid, so we use Twitter ads, Facebook ads, which we're experimenting with all the time, and that's really interesting. There's a lot more social ads that are coming into play now, so Instagram obviously is starting to roll out ads, which would be good for content promotion. Pinterest are going to be rolling out ads too as well soon. So there's lots of different paid versions in social. LinkedIn as well is a really useful channel for paid with the right sort of content. And then we'll also look at other types of platforms, so things like SlideShare, for example. So if you're promoting a campaign and you think actually the people who are going to consume this campaign or I want to target are SlideShare users because they're business users, potentially maybe a B2B campaign, then using some kind of inbound channels like SlideShare are really great to repackage your content into a different form and get it out that way. There's probably lots of others, but actually it's probably a whole nother webinar in itself, I think, when we could look at campaign promotion.
Probably lots of that. Maybe that's something we should do. A couple more questions. feedback here from Jonathan. A good question, I think, is there, obviously content marketing, a bit of a buzz about that at the moment. Is there a difference between general marketing campaigns and content marketing campaigns?
It is a really good question. I think for me, content marketing campaigns are it is tricky because generally with all marketing campaigns, content may be at the heart of it in some form, whether that content is a white paper or a video or an infographic or something like that. It's still content in some forms. But I guess there will be some digital marketing campaigns where okay, so for example, the competition that we ran to give away glasses for life, there was no content as such within that. We obviously created content assets to promote it, but that was all about, it was a competition. So that was a digital marketing campaign where we were promoting something we wanted people to get involved with and engage with in order to give us what we were looking for as part of that campaign. So I think there are slight nuances there, but they do definitely interchange a lot. And I think content marketing is probably just a more of a newer buzzword for actually just for marketing campaigns. They're broadly, you're doing the same thing. You should consider all of the elements, regardless of whether it's content or whether it's something else that you're looking to achieve in that campaign.
Okay, a couple more, and then we'll probably have to wrap up. But another one is, from your experience, do things such as social media work for B2B selling, or is there a better way to reach B2B clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. Social media can work. I think it's all about choosing the channel where you know your audience are going to be interested in finding out about your product or service. So some people do jump to Facebook because they feel that that it's huge. It's got billions of users, therefore I'm going to get traction on here. But actually, your customers might only be using Facebook to post up photos or watch videos of cats, etc. They may not be in the mindset of thinking, I want to use Facebook to buy a product in the business space. So that's when you look to, which networks really do your customers use in the way you want them to use. But there's lots of other networks, as I said, such as SlideShare, which is more of a B2B network as well. So I think it's just picking the right network relevant to your audience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We notice, because we do a lot of data analysis on where people share, and you can see if you're talking about leadership and things, LinkedIn's a very strong network to share on a lot of engagement there. And as you say, more consumer stuff often tends to be on Facebook and things like that. So yeah, I mean, my experience is just search for the topics you're interested in, and you can start to see from that sort of BuzzSumo database where shares are taking place, which networks tend to work well for you. I also find for B2B that specific industry forums work well, where people partake in those. So good. Other ones is, do people share instantly or use Buffer and other tools to schedule? I can say from my experience, before I go on to David, I do a bit of 50-50. Sometimes I share instantly, but often I'm doing my research at weird times, like 1 in the morning or something like that. So I would then schedule using Hootsuite. But I don't know your experience, David.
Yeah, I agree. Same as well, really. We for Fresh Egg, when we're Fresh Egg Marketing, we'll often share stuff instantly, or specifically a blog post will go live, so we'll do that. But we will also schedule. So if we want to re-promote content, and that's the great thing as well, I think, is if you've got a campaign, don't forget to re-promote it. Don't just promote it once, because organic reach of social is very low compared to what you think it might be. So you've got to really re-promote it as much as you can. So yeah, we use a tool called Sprout Social, which allows us to quickly and easily schedule content for weeks or months in advance if we need to.
Yeah, there are lots of good scheduling tools out there. Sprout's a good one. That's obviously Hootsuite and Buffer and others. The final question here, or no, some more questions coming in, but the question here is that do you think finding influence using BuzzSumo is better for a bigger market than a niche one? I think it works for both. My experience is that you have to, on influencer marketing, it's like everything. You've got to build relationships and get to know people. So you can only focus on a few. And what I tend to try and do is avoid sometimes the really big people with lots of followers because they're busy and everything else. But I do use that technique on BuzzSumo of finding really well shared content and then seeing who were the content amplifiers, who shared it, who had a retweet ratio of over 2. And I find that works quite well. If you can see the people who shared an article, who have a retweet ratio of over 2, often they're good amplifiers, and then you could start to build a relationship with those people. Of course, you have to start with building a relationship, being helpful to them, thinking about what you can do for the influencer first. But I do find it quite a useful way of finding quite strong influencers in very niche areas, because I find content which is very specific to what I'm writing about, as opposed to if I put in e-learning or something, and I can find influencers on that, but that's a broad term. Whereas if I find content that's really relevant, then I can focus in on influencers who do that. Other question coming through here, the channels you use to seed content, publications that are receptive. David, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
If it's in terms of publications and media-wise, we will usually work with the process of identifying the right media as such, or the right targets in that space. We'll use BuzzSumo for that because it's great for finding those media people, those journalists as well in those areas. You can just use the search to find journalists in relation to topic areas, which is great. And then we will usually directly contact those, generally via email, and engage with them. We'll engage with them on social where we can as well, and do that more direct kind of contact route. Quite often we do work with clients who have either in-house PR teams or have PR agencies, so quite often we'll work in conjunction with them. Sometimes they will target more national media, and we'll look at the next tier of more online influencers, social influencers as well. Quite often just doing what we call social outreach is really great. If you've created a really nice bit of content, you can just literally tweet at the people that you've mentioned in that content, and they obviously will engage with it. And share it themselves.
Okay, well, I think we have to wrap up now, so we've come to the end of our hour. So thank you very much for all your time and attention. David's details are on the screen. If you want to contact me, I'm just steve@buzzsumo.com, or Steve Rayson at Twitter, but just steve@buzzsumo.com if you've got any questions on the BuzzSumo side of things. We will send a follow-up email tomorrow. It'll probably contain further information in terms of where you can find the recording and the slides, etc. But thank you again very much for your attendance. And yeah, any questions or anything, just be in touch. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.